I think we might get started. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's virtual symposium on sustainability and the clean energy transition. My name is Barbara Klompenhauer. I am the Australian Government Counsellor for Education and Research based in Mexico City, but working with the 4 countries of the Pacific Alliance, including Colombia and Chile. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by my counterpart counsellor in the Australian Embassy in Brazil, Cassia Hare, as part of the Department of Education's hosting of this event. I'd like to acknowledge the Regional Universities Network of Australia, who is partnering with the department on this event, and in particular Alec Webb, the Executive Director. I'd also like to acknowledge today's speakers who will be joining us to share their expertise and perspectives from Australia, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil, from their countries, but also their institutions and their particular research interests relating to this important topic. We welcome Professor Mark Brown of the University of the Sunshine Coast from Australia, Professor Luis Pereira Ramos from the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil, Professor Daniel Olivares from Adolfo Ibáñez University in Chile, and Professor Nelly Cantillo from Colombia's Universidad del Rosario. I'd also like to welcome today's participants, who include researchers, academics, and representatives from the public and private sectors across a number of countries. Today's symposium is a preparatory event to a planned delegation by the Regional Universities Network of Australia to Brazil, Chile, and Colombia in March 2024. This delegation is focused on increasing opportunities for international collaboration with Australian regional universities in this increasingly important research space. The idea of today's event is to create a virtual networking platform to begin conversations in relation to this research area ahead of the visit, and to begin stimulating networks between researchers and institutions between Australia and the region. So everybody who's attending should have received an agenda, but briefly to touch on the plans for tonight's discussion, we will open with some introductory remarks by Alec Webb, the Executive Director of the Regional Universities Network, and we'll then move into interventions from our leading researchers and speakers today around the global clean energy transition. That will be followed by a panel discussion moderated by my counterpart, Cassia Hare, and then finally we'll share some concluding remarks on next year's plans before breaking out into virtual networking lounges, where you'll have the opportunity to speak further with each other and hopefully identify some opportunities for future collaborations together. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite my colleague Alec Webb to hopefully turn on his camera if all is working, and to begin with an overview of the Regional Universities Network and its research on sustainability and the clean energy transition. Thank you very much, Alec.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Good morning, good evening, hello, wherever you are. As Barbara so succinctly made clear, I'm Alec Webb and I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Universities Network, or RUN for short. The Regional Universities Network is the peak body for 7 regional Australian universities. Based in Canberra, the nation's capital, RUN's role is to advocate for regional universities and the issues that matter to them and to regional Australia. I raise the profile of member institutions, both individually and collectively, with government and political stakeholders, whilst also identifying opportunities for collaborations across the membership. RUN is comprised of 7 universities. You can see on this tiny little map here with the little blue dots where all of the campuses are located. In no particular order, we have CQ University, the University of the Sunshine Coast, the University of Southern Queensland, Southern Cross University, University of New England, Charles Sturt University, and Federation University. Geographically, RUN members have campuses from the far north to the far south of the mainland Australia, a distance of approximately 3,000 kilometres. We have approximately 40 campuses across Australia, campuses which are embedded deeply within their communities. Campuses which provide country-leading learning and teaching and highly skilled workforces to regional communities. Run universities engage in transformational place-based research to the betterment of Australia's regional communities. For context, around 28% of Australia's total population live in regional Australia, and regional Australia accounts for approximately 40% of the nation's economic output. Because run universities have missions that are tied to their community, it should come as no surprise that run universities serve distinctly different cohorts of students. The universities of run enrol the highest number of Indigenous Australians, of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and students from regional, remote, and rural Australia. 1 in every 4 Indigenous students and 1 in every 5 students from low socioeconomic backgrounds in Australia studies at a run universities. Run universities are providing opportunities to Australians that others historically have not. And evidence suggests approximately 70% of regional graduates go on to remain in the regions post-graduation, providing an essential workforce of highly skilled and industry-aligned graduates. Regional universities are incredibly proud of the role that they play. That is not to say, of course, that there are not challenges, especially when it comes to the delivery of postgraduate research students. 84% of research students at run universities are likely to be 30 or over, compared to 51% at large metropolitan universities. 40% of run research students are external, and 45% of run research students are part-time. Couple this with the challenges associated with the tyranny of distance inherent in operating in regional areas, and it becomes clear that regional universities must operate differently to provide the often unique opportunities to students who would not have the opportunity otherwise. But different is not worse. Different has led regional universities to undertake deeply engaged, highly impactful research that is relevant to our communities. Different has shown that regional universities lead the country for graduate outcomes in terms of starting salaries and employment. Regional universities achieve phenomenal impact in both basic and applied research, as well as phenomenal teaching and learning. To help place this into context, regional universities are quickly growing their research outputs across a variety of disciplines. As this graph shows indexed to 100, you can see the phenomenal growth in terms of research outputs from run universities. Run universities lead the country in the research fields of environmental science and management, agriculture and veterinary sciences, agriculture, land and farm management, and fisheries and forestry sciences. Additionally, run universities conduct research above world standard in the majority of fields, including engineering, nursing, astronomical and space sciences, geology, oceanography, technology, and neurosciences. This graph shows the number of co-authored publications across my member institutions with countries Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. And I'm proud to say that the number of co-authored publications has been increasing in recent years. So whilst you've heard about my members and some of the context and the environments in which we operate, let me now turn to the opportunities that exist around sustainability and clean energy transition, the reason we are all here today. First and foremost, it is important to consider the significant impact that this transition will have on Australia's region. For those of you who are unaware of Australia's geography and the concentration of energy sources, both old and new, and with the push to sustainability in the clean energy transition, it is going to impact Australia's regions most. Not only are Australia's regions responsible for the majority of Australia's traditional energy production, they are also home to the majority of new clean energy sources. This will have a transformational effect and impact as communities and citizens find themselves faced with the closure of their traditional industrial profile. And while this provides opportunities for upskilling and reskilling, there is significant social impact as well as the technological impact associated with this change. And this is where regional universities will play a vital role. The Australian government is also playing a vital role in driving forward the sustainability and the clean energy transition. And this is important for many reasons. First, it signals to universities and the community the importance of this issue. And secondly, as I'm sure we all know, research doesn't happen without funding. And by dedicating and pushing this charge, the government will additionally provide funding for that important research that will have to take place in the regions. For instance, the Australian government has allocated up to $3 billion for renewables and low emissions technology through the National Reconstruction Fund, and a further $1.9 billion in Powering the Regions Fund to support Australian industry transition while funding new clean energy industries and Australia's new energy workforce. And while I don't want to steal the thunder of Mark, who will follow me a little bit later today, let me just briefly outline some of the initiatives and activities that regional universities are undertaking on this important theme. CQ University has the Centre for Hydrogen and Renewable Energies in Gladstone, Queensland, which was developed to provide world-class research, training and support for the emerging hydrogen and renewable energy industries in central Queensland. The centre's research and development activities include new products based on green hydrogen, manufacturing propulsion systems and energy production, the export and domestic use of hydrogen, and research on the applications of hydrogen fuel cells and other renewable energies such as biodiesel from waste plastics and solar energy. Federation University have established the Centre for New Energy Transition Research to respond to the pressing needs for research, training, and skills development in new energy and decarbonisation. The Centre's focus is on fundamental and applied research to develop advanced knowledge in green power and low carbon technologies for a sustainable ecosystem, and has 4 main research streams: microgrids and renewables, future grid and community energy, future fuel and hydrogen economy, and net zero initiatives. Federation University have also established the Future Regions Research Centre, which through 2 of its 5 research streams, soil healthy food and fibre and circular economy, covers the topics of decarbonisation from various angles. Finally, and I'm sure you'll hear all about this from Mark, the University of the Sunshine Coast have a strong decarbonisation focus, primarily through climate adaptation, potential of tropical forests, reforestation and sustainable forest management, low carbon forestry and land management practices, offsets from sustainable aquaculture, livestock management, reducing emissions from livestock by improving feed quality, and improving the efficiency of energy use in transport. Now, I know that I'm pressed for time, so this is just a bit of taster of what regional universities in Australia are doing when it comes to sustainability and the clean energy transition. I and my colleagues at RUM look forward to hearing from today's speakers and exploring collaborative opportunities between our countries, our regions, and our institutions going forward. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Alec, for your presentation and excellent overview about the diversity of work that is happening across the regional universities network. I would like to take the opportunity now, before we move into our presentations, to just let everybody know that we do have the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves as we're talking over the next hour, that'll be a great place to start the networking process. And next to that, you'll also see a Q&A function. So if you have any questions around any of the material Alec has just shared, I'm sure when we get to the discussion, Cassia can circle back and ask some of those questions. So please feel free to add questions in that box as we move through our presentations today. So thank you again, Alec. And without any further ado, it's my great pleasure now to move into today's speakers from the 4 featured countries. We are going in alphabetical order, so that means we start with Australia and Professor Mark Brown from the University of the Sunshine Coast. Professor Brown, we've shared your bio with today's participants, so I won't read through your impressive achievements, but instead we'll pass the floor to you to share your presentation on your perspectives around today's research theme and the work that is happening at the University of the Sunshine Coast. So thank you very much for your time, Professor Brown. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So the first big test is my audio connected.
Success, we can hear you.
Okay, that's the next big test is whether I can share the right screen. Apologies. So do you have a presentation mode screen now?
We do, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for the introduction and especially that overview of the Run network. So that gives me a pretty good context to start the presentation here. I am presenting on behalf of the Forest Research Institute from the University of the Sunshine Coast. So we're one element of the research. So some of those examples that were presented from UniSC are at other parts of the university, so I won't go into too much depth on some of those. But I do want to take you through who the Forest Research Institute is and probably highlight some of the strengths that we use our local and national networks and partnerships and leverage those into international collaborations as they relate to the topic. So you can see here a kind of a sketch overview in the different areas of research that we cover within the FRI. And it's everything from forest products, looking at timber durability at the left-hand side of that diagram, through to forest management and plantation management for industrial, primarily timber outcomes. And then we have 2 large areas of research that look more specifically at forest conservation and forest restoration, and particularly the nature-based solutions engaging in that climate change and energy transition space around carbon and carbon values as they relate to forest restoration and community development related to those projects. The standard slide from university in terms of who we are in the metrics gives you an idea of the scale of research that we have. So 76 members, about half of that is PhD students, and a bit more than half of that is research academics, most of which are based on the Sunshine Coast. Some are spread across Australia in co-location arrangements with some of our industry partners. So I'm going to start with a large project connected to the energy transition around carbon. And this is actually in the Asia Pacific, and it's a piece of work funded by a major industry partner from the petroleum industry, looking at opportunities to drive forest management at a community level, such that the economic returns are generated through carbon and carbon values. And there's a myriad of local benefits around social and economic development for the local communities, as well as the environmental outcomes around water quality improvements, improved water availability, biodiversity, and other features that are managed through those forests. So a real highlight of this is bringing a whole pool of expertise that we've developed through research partnerships over the last 20 years across our research group, and consolidating those into a major commercially driven project with an industry partner in country. So our experts are working with local partners to develop and establish key expertise within those communities, so that in 5-10 years from now, as we transition from a research activity into a fully commercial activity, that the skills and capabilities and understanding are on the ground to deliver those. Just really quickly, I don't expect you to read through all this, and the file will be shared, but you can see the diverse areas of research and research topics that are captured through this work and through this international collaboration, a vast majority of those 15 PhD students are coming from overseas, particularly from either the country of the project being the Philippines, or related Asia Pacific or Pacific Island countries that can pick up the knowledge from this project and potentially translate it across the region around forest management and forest restoration opportunities. The next area I'll touch on, and again, we're very active across the Southern Hemisphere in this space, is the area of biosecurity and pest management as it relates to forest management. And in this case, this is built quite heavily off of a long-standing research collaboration partnership we have with the Queensland government here in Queensland, Australia, and specifically with the research team at the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. And this looks quite specifically at insects, fungus, and different diseases that impact forestry and managed forest, either for timber production or other purposes. And basically strategies that will allow us to more effectively identify issues and working with industry determine which of those require particular interventions before they have a negative impact on the forest, and those that just have to be managed in the landscape as part of a natural system. So through that collaboration with the Queensland government, which is a very strong local collaboration in regional Australia, we've also established and managed a major forest pest management with the all of the forest growers in Australia. So the plantation industry that produces most of the industrial timber and fiber in Australia. So about 2 million hectares of plantation forests. And basically this is a cooperation across about 75 to 80% of those plantation managers about developing innovative strategies and systems to manage things like weeds, pests, and disease as they relate to the plantations. And that collaborative approach is really about keeping options available that they otherwise couldn't gain access to, either due to registration and legislation limitations, or simply not being affordable for an individual company to keep up the knowledge base required to safely and effectively use those chemicals, as well as use them in a way that is effective or acceptable within industry standard and certification programs on the international scale. So leveraging off of that and the expertise we've developed in biosecurity, we now have two major international projects, one in the Asia Pacific in Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia, where we work with local experts around developing their skills and knowledge to drive better biosecurity, so how to detect insects and determine whether they're an issue to be managed or not. And we're basically replicating that project from the Southeast Asia into Africa now with a project based in Ethiopia. Again, doing research to understand the local issues around biosecurity and pest management, and then working with local expertise to embed that expertise in country. So again, as this relates to energy transition, a big piece of the puzzle in terms of carbon sequestration and renewable energies lies in forests as part of the landscape, and ensuring that those forests are both healthy and productive, we see is quite critical on a global scale, and being able to roll that expertise out across various regions and key forested countries in the world, we see as quite an impactful approach to having an effect. The last kind of national collaboration that I'll highlight and link to our international network is the work we do in forest supply chains, and specifically in the energy transition space. How do we capture and use what would be otherwise residue from industrial plantation and industrial forest management for renewable energy, renewable fuel production? So we again lead a collaboration across about 75% of the plantation owners and managers, as well as some of the native forest managers in Australia, And again, it's a consolidated approach about developing pre-commercial expertise and knowledge on efficient harvesting and material handling, as well as logistics and optimized supply chain solutions. So again, the power of numbers and collaboration is what drives our industry to collaborate in that space. And then from there, they pick up the key knowledge outcomes that we generate through the research and either independently or with support from our research team implement that into their individual businesses. How that translates into the energy space, as I said, is really about understanding what would otherwise be called residue in traditional forest operations and capturing that material, and understanding how to integrate that into the supply chain in a cost-effective way, such that you become an attractive option, or you can engage with whatever renewable energy option presents itself, which I attended a meeting yesterday looking at a national collaboration around how that material may be suitable for a sustainable aviation fuel solution in Queensland. So looking internationally about how we connect, the FRI is the Australian representative in the IEA Bioenergy Technology Collaboration Program. This program brings together 25 countries with strong representation from North America and Europe in those 25 countries, looking at challenges, issues, and research around bioenergy and facilitating its implementation globally. So the key for us in the FRI is this creates a really strong network of well-identified experts and knowledge from countries that are at different stages of bioenergy and biomass supply development. So you can see here, I lead a program on behalf of FRI looking at the biomass supply specifically. So that's one of 11 tasks in the technology collaboration. The other 10 tasks, about 3/4 of them touch on specific bioenergy technologies. So how to convert biomass to an energy pathway, whether it be fuels, energy directly, heat, or other. And then a handful of other tasks look at cross-cutting issues like sustainability, grid integration, energy network integration, and others. So again, building off of a very strong local collaborative partnership with industry that has national connection and impact, we leverage in the network we have internationally to bring that expertise to bear on local challenges and bring our local expertise and knowledge to bear on international knowledge and research development. So kind of 3 high-level examples touching on different areas of energy transition, whether it be the carbon question, how we manage resources into a changing climate and remain a viable solution to support energy transition, through to the actual physical supply of materials that could potentially become renewable energy or renewable fuels. So I just want to conclude with a few overarching or connecting thoughts there, that from our perspective at a regional university, we see strength in our regional partnerships, and those become our foundation for building national programs, which we've done across a number of related research areas for forestry. And then those regional and local partnerships, along with the national connectivity of our research, gives us a really strong platform to engage with those international opportunities and collaborations, such that we deliver high value and impact both locally and nationally with our networks, as well as contributing in a very effective way to the international collaborations. So happy to conclude there, and I'm not sure if we want to do questions now or at the end.
Rule 1, always unmute. Thank you so much, Professor Brown, for your presentation. That was fascinating, and particularly some of those reflections about research with impact at the local, national and international level, which I think will resonate with many people on tonight's session. We might do questions at the end, just so that we can bring them up first in the panel discussion and then, of course, at the end of the webinar. But I'm sure there will be questions, and so that's a good chance to remind everybody, if you'd like to leave a question for Professor Brown after his presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure we pick that up in the panel discussion later on. So thank you so much again, Professor Brown. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you also to everybody who's using the opportunity in the chat to introduce yourselves. There's a lot of really interesting people here covering a lot of topics, and I've seen some comments already noting that your work at the University of the Sunshine Coast is very relevant for research happening across the region. So thank you again, and without further ado, it's my pleasure to now introduce our next speaker, who is Professor Luis Pereira Ramos of the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. Thank you very much for your time, and we're very much looking forward to your presentation and perspectives from Brazil, and specifically the Federal University of Paraná. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's not in presentation mode, but we can see your screen.
Okay.
There we go.
Good. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to share this workshop with representatives of other run universities. It is an effort that I wasn't aware of, but good that I have the opportunity to be involved with the activities of RUN from now on, if possible. Well, the title of my talk is Transition to a Low Carbon Bioeconomy in Brazil, Renewable Energy, PTX, and Sustainable Fuels. So we know that Brazil has a very strong energy matrix with regard to renewables. We're up to 47.4% distributed in different types of approaches. 31.4% of this matrix is based on biomass, sugarcane, firewood and charcoal, black liquor, and others. 12.5% hydroelectric power, 2.3% wind power, and 1.2% solar. But of course, even though having a very strong and green energy matrix, we still have a long way to go, since 35.7% of our energy is produced from oil and oil products. This is, of course, bound to be changed by the energy transition that's going on, particularly with the hydrogen. I'm sorry for this slide to be written in Portuguese, but all it says is that about $30 billion are being projected for the next coming years in hydrogen production processes. And this based on, of course, renewable energy, either wind or solar, but there are also contributions from other sources based on the concept that we cannot base ourselves on green energy, on green hydrogen only. This concept of low carbon emission hydrogen is picking up quite strongly internationally, and I believe that this is the way to go, so that to generate enough hydrogen for the global energy transition. If we take a look at the Brazilian electricity matrix, then those numbers are even higher. We're talking about up to 92% renewables in the matrix, and this has been actually growing in the last little while, pushed by the solar photovoltaics. As you see in this slide, the solar photovoltaics experienced a 92.7% increase over 2021. And this is basically due to the increased installations of panels all across the country. One can say that solar energy is very democratic, and solar panels are being spread all over the place. So renewable energy is an important component of the energy transition, but we also have to look at how to produce those chemicals that we need, focusing on three, in my view, keywords that define the word biorefinery, and that is decarbonization, defossilization, and decentralization of energy production. And by this, we would be able to produce biofuels, renewable energy, and also value-added products from biomass, not only biofuels, but also materials that could be used to replace petroleum-based derivatives. So biorefinery is a facility that integrates several processes aimed at producing renewable fuels, power, heat, value-added chemicals, advanced materials, all of that using biomass as a feedstock. There are other opportunities as well, but for now, I believe that we could stick to this concept. So a biorefinery is analogous to a petrochemical refinery in that way, because we need to do most out of our biomass. We cannot waste anything. And the first step towards utilizing the integrity of our biomass sources is to know its chemical composition. The chemistry involved in determining the composition of these feedstocks is very important, so that we can do the best out of it and generate not only one product, but several, developing with this the concept of advanced biorefineries, admitting multiple feedstocks and also producing multiple products. Biofuels are important in that concept of decarbonization or defossilization as well. And the benefits of developing processes for producing sustainable biofuels are well known by this audience, I'm pretty sure. All the way from reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving air quality as a consequence, reduce waste accumulation, but more importantly, to create jobs and improve income in rural areas, strengthen the local production chains, and preserve local biodiversity. There's also an impact on health. And here I brought these 3 points. First, to improve quality of living. Second, to reduce the incidence of respiratory diseases, and this has been well documented worldwide, with a consequence of increasing life expectancy. There are several possibilities around the concept of biofuels: oxygenated biofuels, non-oxygenated biofuels, synthetic fuels, and e-fuels. Out of the oxygenated ones, methanol, ethanol, butanol, biodiesel as fatty acid alkyl esters, dimethyl ether, furan derivatives, that are all very important. But of course, if we want to develop the concept of drop-in fuels, then we need to move on to non-oxygenated fuels, such as those produced by microbial fermentation, but also produced chemically by hydrotreatment technologies, delivering green diesel, biogasoline, sustainable aviation fuels, biobunker, and so on and so forth. If these synthetic fuels are produced using renewable energy, then we have the concept of e-fuels. Now, there are several processing technologies available to convert feedstocks or feedstocks components into different fuels. And we can see here crude vegetable oil. We could add waste cooking oil or waste greases as well. I mean, waste material, sugars, lignin, bio-oil, bio-crude, syngas, tall oil, terpenes. Anyway, these are fuel precursors that can be used by different methods or techniques to produce all of those fuels that I have mentioned before, plus others. So one can see that depending on the feedstock, several of these technologies can be used to produce the desired bio-based fuels with the low carbon footprint that we so much desire. This is an interesting chart. We have several ourselves, but I like to bring this done by Professor Mats Galbe from Lund University. And he here shows a combination of the so-called biochemical route together with the thermochemical one. And one can see that biomass, the lignocellulosic materials that were mentioned before by the Professor Mark Brown, we can deconstruct the plant cell wall of those residues and obtained streams of lignin, C6 sugars, mostly cellulose, but of course starch plays a role in here, although starch is not found in lignocellulosics, but there are other sources, of course, and C5 sugars that will come from the hemicellulose moiety. And then by utilizing different technologies, one can get to the different types of fuels that we have mentioned before, as well as biomaterials such as biopolymers, renewable resins, and biomaterials overall. This is just an example of one project that we had together with several industrial partners participating in this effort, using acid-based pretreatments to fractionate biomass and follow two routes. One for producing second-generation ethanol that could even go to non-oxygenated fuels by ATG technologies, for instance, but also trying to produce other chemicals that are important in this scenario, such as in the case of lactic acid for producing PLA. A PLA of second generation would derive then from sugars produced from lignocellulosics. But then we have the hydrolysis lignin, and this hydrolysis lignin that is left behind after enzymatic hydrolysis can then be utilized for thermal processes, either pyrolysis, thermal co-liquefaction, even gasification, if one wants to do so, to end up as drop-in fuels, or in the case of gasification, in synthesis gas that could then be transformed in non-oxygenated fuels through the Fischer-Tropsch mechanisms. Brazil has also an important contribution in the biodiesel sector. Even though biodiesel is phasing out in many regions in the world, this is not the case in our country. Biodiesel is still developing. We still have a very strong national plan in progress, aiming at larger or higher mixtures in petrodiesel. But not only biodiesel, but there's also an interest in utilizing everything that could be derived from the oil-bearing materials to produce fuels, chemicals, polymers, pharmaceuticals. Glycerol is such an important component in this chart. And we recently did a very interesting study utilizing glycerol from oleaginous materials to produce hydrogen. And you know, the results were quite interesting. So, of course, this is very important, not only for the glycerol and other things that could derive from oil-bearing materials, but also because the fat, the animal fat, and also the vegetable oils could be converted to drop-in fuels by hydrotreatment, utilizing green hydrogen, of course. Hydrogenated vegetable oils have been claimed as the most important drop-in fuel so far tested. And of course, there's more to come, but most of the tests done so far is based on this type of material. Let me move on to talking a little bit about PTX. Of course, hydrogen will be required for this because we cannot go to drop-in fuels from animal fat or vegetable oils without hydrogen. But hydrogen is also important to be combined with non-necessarily biogenic carbon sources such as CO2 to produce e-fuels. And this will not ever be viable if hydrogen is not available at a competitive cost. And of course, this hydrogen has to be based on renewable energy. Now with that, Brazil, Chile, Argentina are the places in the world that are meant to produce the lowest hydrogen, sustainable hydrogen, by, let's say, comparing 28 different markets. And this is quite interesting and motivating for all of us, because we could then eventually conceive the possibility of delivering important hydrogen carriers or chemicals throughout the world at competitive costs. Hydrogen from sustainable processes plus CO2, either captured from the air or from high emitters, could then be utilized together with water in co-electrolysis to produce syngas directly and feed a Fischer-Tropsch synthesis to produce then e-fuels. And this is something quite relevant for countries such as Brazil, because it takes us a lot of money to bring diesel to the countryside. So processes that could exercise the idea of decentralizing energy production is very important to all of us. This is just a very brief overview of the carbon sources. And the one that we are focusing more in our research group is the CO2 and the methane coming from anaerobic fermentation. This way one can convert wastes into fuels in a very efficient way. Of course, efficiency is still a problem. You know, this is not a commercial program. It's not a commercial process, but things are moving along quite fast, and we are envisaging some possibilities to the end. So to the end of my talk, with hydrogen and sustainable carbon sources, one can produce so many different important chemicals and energy carriers that, you know, this is actually a way of eventually putting our effort into developing these areas further. My final remarks is that advanced bio-based biorefineries are important drivers to the development of sustainable bioeconomies and to decarbonization of the energy sector, as well as to many other areas related to this. Biorefineries must be diverse and protect food security. And of course, the acceleration of this energy transition needs partnership. And I hope that events like this could bring institutions together so that we could meet these important goals. Well, sorry for being 1 minute above time. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to questions whenever.
Thank you so much, Professor Ramos, for that fascinating presentation. And I love the slide at the end with the location, if you want to keep that up for a moment. That was excellent. I didn't mean to cut you off there. But thank you very much for your insights. I think the word that jumps out to me is opportunity, listening to everything that you've just been sharing with us. And I note that there are some questions that already have come through for you in the chat, and hopefully we can pick up on that when we get to the panel discussion shortly with my colleague Cassia. So thank you very much again. And now we move from where we saw briefly on the map there in Brazil across to colleagues in Chile, and specifically Professor Daniel Olivares from Adolfo Ibáñez University. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us here today. We're looking forward to hearing the work that you're part of in Chile and some of your perspectives on today's research theme. So without further ado, thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the invitation. Well, my name is Daniel Olivares, and I'm the director of the UAI Center for Energy Transition. So let me start first by telling you a little bit about Centra, which is the center that I direct. So the center is quite new. It started less than 2 years ago. It was created with a clear mandate from the university president and board, which is to do research with impact. And for that, we are actively looking for partnerships with the public and private sectors in order to maximize impact on society. We conduct and transfer interdisciplinary research related to energy transition in the areas of economical aspects, environmental impact, and technical issues of the transition as well. So we organize our research in 4 multidisciplinary challenges, which are quite well aligned with the Sustainable Development Objectives from the United Nations. The first one is clean fuels. So Chile has put forward an ambitious strategy as well to become one of the main players in the green hydrogen industry, but also in the production of synthetic fuels based on hydrogen. And on this arena, we work on the technological side. We have colleagues working on prototypes for producing synthetic fuels with high efficiency in Chile, but we also work on the energy policy aspects and modeling of the energy systems and how to better integrate these new energy sources. Our second area of applications is sustainable and resilient energy supply. On this area, we develop models to understand how we can plan and operate energy systems so that they are efficient but also more resilient to climate change. We also work on the conversion of industrial processes in order to either be electrified or use clean fuels. And we also have an area of research on sustainable energy in cities and communities, which combine expertise from our colleagues on the community side and also on the technical aspects of microgrids and in isolated areas. This is our current base of members. These are all full-time faculty members at Adolfo Ibáñez University. I think I'm missing a couple of colleagues that recently joined the university and also the center. And we also have 4 external members who are professionals working in the industry, and they participate in several of our activities. So in order to exemplify the kind of work we do at Centra, I would like to tell you about this research project, which we just finished a few months ago. It's part of our Industrial Research Chair program, which is research program funded by an industry partner. It goes in duration from 1 year up to 3 years. So we partner with ASESOL in this project, which is a local association of power producers, small-scale power producers, mostly rooftop solar installations and what we call small generators in distribution systems. And the idea with them was to estimate how much distributed generation we can put in our distribution systems without running into technical limits. So before we started this program, we did a study for ASESOL where we identified several barriers for the large-scale implementation of distributed generation in Chile. Most of them were related with the regulation, but we also identified several technical aspects that were not allowing the industry to be developed at their full capacity. So the objectives that we planned for this project were to develop a computational platform that consists of databases, automated modeling, and several analysis and visualization tools in order to understand how much distributed generation we can install in the system, and also which are the most typical technical issues that we will be running into as we increase the penetration of these resources. So we have a team of electrical engineers and also data analysts that help us build a database of all the distribution systems, distribution networks for one of the largest companies in Chile, which covers several cities in the south of Chile. So we developed tools for the automated modeling of the network, also automated identification of errors in the models, so that we can easily then correct and look for the correct information on those models. And we also build several visualization and tables at the end so that the results can be understood better. This is a picture of 3 of the distribution systems that we analyzed. We analyzed many more, but these are 3 examples. One of them is in Valdivia, in the south of Chile, Osorno and Picarte, actually three cities in the south of Chile. And we also, in the process, we had to build several load curves for Monte Carlo analysis. So when we analyze the hosting capacity of distribution systems, we have to analyze several scenarios. We don't have actual data for those scenarios, so we need to build synthetic scenarios for that, based, of course, on the actual measurements of the system. With all this, we used a free open source model, which is called OpenDSS, which is actually utility grade software. It's used in many industries for actual analysis in the not for research, but for actual implementations. And we analyzed. Okay, so what we did is to say we want to install rooftop solar panels in several cities in the country. So we are going to start populating the electricity grid with solar panels of a capacity that averages 3 kilowatts photovoltaic. We assume a summer day with clear skies, so that we analyze the worst conditions in terms of the best condition in terms of the resource, but the worst condition in terms of the technical limitations of the grid. And we started increasing the number of panels in the grid and started to see what happened. So in this particular network, we started running into problems when we reached 10% of PV penetration. That means 10% of the consumers in the network with PV panels installed. And those PV panels averaged 3 kilowatts per user. And the first problem that we ran into is the saturation of the distribution transformers because of current capacity. But also in several parts, we ran into voltage problems. So in the hours of more solar power, we can observe at the end of the feeders, you can observe voltage raises that can even be beyond the limits that the code establishes. So we ran several simulations of this, and we identify which were the most typical technical limits. The most typical one was overvoltage. The second one is transformer thermal limits. And in the end, only when we reach nearly 80% of penetration, we start running into conductor thermal limits, which means that we have to change the conductor of the feeder, which is most costly. So we did this for several distribution feeders, and then we used those feeders as the centers of the clusters of all the distribution feeders in Chile. And in order to do this, we partner with the Superintendencia de Electricidad in Chile, which is our, it's not our regulator, it's our, it oversees all the electricity installations and makes sure that the code is being complied with. So they have the information of all the distribution feeders in Chile, but not with the sufficient level of detail to perform electrical analysis, but with enough level of detail to cluster them in several groups so that we can see which of the distribution feeders that we did model are more similar to the ones in the rest of Chile. So we did a sort of reverse clustering of our networks in order to estimate how much is the total hosting capacity of distributed generation in Chile. And the numbers we reached at were very interesting for the industry, actually. They weren't expecting this kind of results. This is much more than they were expecting. So what we found is that without implementing any measure of mitigation, the distribution networks in Chile can integrate up to 5.8 gigawatts of PV capacity at the residential level. This is basically rooftop solar. This is nearly 20% of the current total installed capacity in Chile, considering all the technologies, and not only renewable, but all of them. And it's actually 83% of the current PV installed capacity, which is mostly utility grade, utility scale, sorry. The second point is that if we upgrade the secondary transformers in the feeders, the limit can be pushed up to 12.1 gigawatts, which corresponds to approximately 40% of the total installed capacity in Chile and 166% of the current PV installed capacity in Chile. So it's huge. And this does not account for additional mitigation measures that we can apply if electric vehicles are in place in the networks. In that case, we can use the energy storage systems in the vehicles, or even standalone energy storage systems, to manage the loading of the feeders better throughout the day. So this is a good example of the kind of research we do at the center. We try to be very applied, but also to utilize innovative methodologies. So let me just now give you a brief sample of other research projects that we have been developing in the last couple of years. We have a special focus on the long-term energy planning. That's because we have been developing with some other colleagues for almost 6 years, even before the center was created. We have been co-developing a very state-of-the-art energy planning tool, which is based on the switch model that was originally developed at LBNL in California. And this model allows us to analyze different trajectories to reach net zero by 2050, which is the pledge that Chile has. And we can analyze different scenarios where CSP is an efficient technology, where energy storage becomes cheaper, where the gas-fired power plants are also being phased out, and so on and so forth. So one particular analysis that we completed recently is to analyze what's the actual value of energy storage in the system, not only in terms of the energy that it can store and then inject back, in terms of energy efficiency, but also how it contributes to security in the system. And we have also analyzed how the green hydrogen industry can impact the energy system as a whole. In terms of small-scale applications, we have done quite a bit of research also on microgrids and active distribution networks. In particularly, we have a lot of expertise in the design of energy management systems for microgrids. We have also worked on the planning of isolated microgrids to achieve desired levels of security and reliability. We have worked on the design of local energy markets to allow peer-to-peer transactions within microgrids. And we have also extended the same ideas to active distribution networks with multiple DERs. In this case, grid-connected, what we call grid-connected microgrids. And we have other research interests that we are actively looking for partners to push forward. One of them is sustainable cities. So we are aiming with a group of researchers in the university, and this goes even beyond Centra, to establish centralized planning and management tools that can combine decisions on the use of territory, water management, waste management, energy supply, and organization of the community and local governance as well. I have two colleagues working on nanophotonics for solar thermal energy management and conversion technologies. For example, passive radiative cooling coating, solar fuels, desalination, and thermochromic smart windows. We are studying a line on CO2 capture with colleagues from Canada as well. We're partnering with colleagues in Canada. And we also are analyzing the second life of PV panels and how they can be reutilized or refurbished for further utilization with lower efficiency. Well, that's a brief overview of our activities. Hopefully I did it on time. Thank you, Barbara.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Olivares, and apologies. It's the hardest job being a moderator and jumping in when, the first presentations are as interesting as they are. But hopefully we've left enough time that we'll have a good discussion with questions as well from the group at the end. And so without any further ado, the last speaker, last but not least, joins us from Colombia, Professor Nelly Cantillo from the Universidad de Rosario. Thank you very much for your presentation and for completing the global tour we've had with Australia, Brazil, Chile, and now Colombia before we move into a discussion with Cassia. So thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, hello, everybody. I am really thankful for the invitation to participate today and for the opportunity to share some of our initiatives in terms of sustainability and clean energy transition here in La Universidad del Rosario. My name is Nelly Cantillo. I am a professor here. I am also the director of the Energy Systems Engineering Program. And I will start with a little bit of a overview, right, of our current status in Colombia. Right now, Colombia, this is from the report from the International Energy Agency 2023. And it shows mainly that currently we are an oil and coal net exporting country. Most of our production, of our energy production right now is based on fossil fuels. We're talking about over 89% of our total production. However, we can see that most of our energy production is actually going towards exports, right? We can see the difference here between the produced amount and the total energy supply. And here we'll see that, as I mentioned before, is mainly based on fossil fuels, oil, particularly coal and natural gas. But we have a small share of renewable energy, mainly based on hydro and bioenergy and waste, which is also one of our focus. Being the last one, I have already started seeing, right, some alignment between the different presentations and the different priorities for the countries that we are showcasing here. And in the last plot that I have here, I have a little bit of the demand in the country. So in this case, we are focusing mainly on the total energy supply that is, of course, consumed here in the different processes where we have transport as our main consuming sector, but we also have a big contribution of industry and buildings. So in that sense, the Colombian government is trying to pursue a reindustrialization policy with the main aim of shifting from an extraction economy to a productive and sustainable knowledge economy. Here we can see that it has been framed in what it's been called a just energy transition, that one of the main steps that the government here has taken in this direction has been the elaboration of the National Development Plan. And right now we are working precisely in the National Just Energy Transition Roadmap. This roadmap sets out the actions that are needed to achieve energy access for all in a fair and just transition, trying to engage the regions and citizens in the energy transition and expand its economic benefits, including the support and the creation of energy communities. Here we have in this slide, and I hope you can see my pointer, but we have here one of the main drivers for energy transition in Colombia. In the right side, we have the energy, specifically the electricity mix metrics in Colombia, which is mostly composed by hydro, right? That, of course, is an advantage. Our electricity mix is considered a clean one, right? Because it's mainly based on a renewable resource. However, that also makes us susceptible to natural phenomena or phenomena like El Nino, for example, that can, in a sense, puts or strains our ability to secure energy production. So that has been one of the main motivators for the just energy transition, along with the big and ambitious goals that we as a country or as a nation have put in terms of reduction or emissions reductions. Right now, our reduction target is set at 51% for 2030. Here in this slide, we can see our current emission levels and the target that we have for 2030. That as I mentioned, it is an ambitious one if we take into account that it projects a 43% reduction in around 12. If we compare it with goals, for example, for the European Union with targets 55% reduction over a 40-year span, right? So this is the main motivator, right, for this, for both sustainable and clean energy transition research in the country. And in that sense, I think all the different sectors have responded to these goals. One of the responses that we have had from academia, and here I want to, of course, showcase a little bit the program that I am currently directing. So one of the responses that we have had from academia has been, of course, the creation of undergraduate and graduate programs that, in a sense, can provide the human resource that we need, right, to make all of this happen. So the Energy Systems Engineering program that we have here at the Universidad del Rosario have three main, let's say, emphases, which are renewable energies, energy markets, and smart grids. We also have, in general, we have 6 master programs. I have included them all because I think that pretty much clean energy transition can fit in all of these perspectives, but I am, of course, emphasizing our renewable energy master program. And in this sense, and from these type of formation, and as I mentioned, undergraduate and graduate programs, we have already a seed, right, to start doing some of our research. One of our projects that we have recently been working on has been led by Professor David Zeleita here in the school, and has been focused on machine learning for smart energy systems, which has work on machine learning techniques to, in a sense, introduce predictability for power systems and trying to provide a decision-making tool, in a sense, for this type of analysis. This project particularly was or has been funded by the EEE. And here I am also including one of the recent projects that we have had in our master program, in the Renewable Energy Master Program, where we can already see one of the directions that we are going in terms of research. Here, this project particularly is a feasibility study trying to dilucidate between electricity and gas generation from the digestion of the organic fraction of residential waste in a municipality, particularly here in the center of the country. And as I mentioned before, this is already aligned, right, with what Dr. Luis was sharing before, right, because this one has been also a big focus here in the Colombian government. There is the biorefinery approach. In that sense, one of the main or let's say one of the bases or the motivators, right, in this direction has been the estimation, right, of the residues, of the agricultural residues mainly in the country, which has been estimated in around 72 megatons per year. So giving or adding value to this type of residue, of course, as I think was clear also in the previous presentations, doesn't only work towards our clean energy goals, but also towards the management of urban waste or waste in general. One of the projects that I think frame our perspective or our approach in this sense have been led by one of our professors, which is Dr. Maria Fernanda Gomez. And this study particularly, what is aiming at is a combined approach to identify, classify, and analyze the factors that affect the management of municipal solid waste in upper middle income countries. Particularly, of course, our case study was here in Sabana Centro, which is the central region here in Colombia, used as a case study mainly. In this case, this project or this study combined a systematic literature review with participatory workshops. And I want to emphasize that because I think that one of the emphasis or the priorities that we have is, of course, towards the sustainable component or the social component, of sustainability, right? Trying to, of course, involve the different community representatives to get an idea, right, of how should we enable or how should we direct this process of clean energy transition in the right way, right? In this sense, these participatory workshops included in the representatives from environmental entities, directors of the public service companies, representatives of the general community, and solid waste management plan coordinators as well of the different municipalities. And here we can see some of the factors that were identified as important and that gives us already, as I mentioned, a roadmap, let's say, of how should we address these challenges. One of these is the funding schemes, right? Particularly when we are talking about taking advantage of solid waste or municipal solid waste. Putting or in place funding schemes from the national government is one of the factors that we have identified as relevant, as well as the public-private partnerships that must be created to support the waste management activities in municipalities, and of course the public involvement in source separation activities to improve, of course, the management of these types of wastes, and the implementation of waste-to-energy technologies as well. In this same line, I also included here this work from, of course, also Dr. Gomez or Professor Gomez, which proposed particularly the use of a participatory methodology to design, in this case, a biogas-based power plant. This project also involved the participation of stakeholders, taking into account, in this case, not only public service companies and representatives of the community, but also a group of researchers to have the academic perspective, right? So again, this is a way of including, right, that social component that is so important for the development of these initiatives. One of the projects that we are currently working on this line is particularly this project that I am showing in this slide that is focused on the anaerobic digestion for residual biomass. This project is also based on the Gualiba province, located again in Cundinamarca, that is one of our central departments, and is mostly focused on agricultural and livestock residues, and is one of the projects that is currently under development on this sense. Again, as in the two previous examples, integrating the communities and integrating the real conditions for these studies. In another, let's say, another direction, one of the priorities also of the government have been hydrogen integration as an energy vector, which has shown globally to be an important addition, right, for renewable energy integration. This project in particular is also focused on the This project in particular is also focused on the valorization of, in this case, bioethanol. This project was also done or developed in cooperation with, let's say, in this case, sugar cane pressed producers, which is a very rural sector here in the country. So integrating this type of production or this type of process to this sector is important, right? Because it can, in a sense, empower these areas or these small producers. In this case, what we were trying or what we were proposing was, again here, production or fermentation of residues from this process to produce bioethanol and production of green hydrogen from this bioethanol using steam reforming. And finally, the integration of this purified hydrogen to the PEM fuel cell for power generation, right? So as I mentioned, given that these are normally rural-based processes, in a sense is a way of satisfying or supplying energy to some of the processes that are part of this sector. Another project that we have worked previously is an energy model for hydrogen economy. This is one of the main projects that we have worked here in the frame of hydrogen. This project was led by Universidad de La Sabana, and in a sense, I always like to say that in this project the lab was the country, because we were trying to estimate what was taking into account the availability of the different resources, what was the potential generation of green hydrogen and blue hydrogen as well, right? For this project, we use the software LEAP, low emission analysis platform, and the next energy model for optimization software as well, to get an idea of a let's say realistic mix for hydrogen production. In the right side, we can see a little bit of what was the final scenario that was modeled, and how here we were comparing emissions related to what is the business as usual scenario, right? And here the bars represent what was our hydrogen economy scenario, and it just emphasizes, right, how pivotal could be the integration of these type of energy alternatives to accomplish our reduction goals, right, and our reduction targets. One of the projects that we are...
Yes. Very sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, shortly we'll move into a discussion to follow up on some of the issues you've raised in your presentation. So I'll let you conclude, but just wanted to let you know the timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I'm almost done here. One of the projects that I wanted also to mention was the solar energy supply chain, which is a system dynamics model that, in a sense, studies different scenarios. In this case, specifically in terms of job creations, for example. And with that, I'm going to close my participation. Right, I wanted to close just mentioning, as I said before, that one of the main focuses on our research is always the involvement, right, of the communities, so that we can make sure that the measures that we are taking and the steps that we are taking are going right in the right direction for the whole group, right? So thank you very much with that, and I apologize if I took a little bit too much.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, Professor Cantillo. It was a fascinating presentation, really interesting to understand the context in Colombia too for the work that the university is leading in this space. And the reason I jumped in was actually to talk more with you and everybody who's presented this evening, because my colleague Cassia Hare is now going to lead a panel discussion with all of our speakers from today. And so before passing to Cassia, I just note to everybody, do have a look in the chat. There's a lot of interesting information around who's joined us, their research interests, where they're looking to connect. Many are from the Regional Universities Network in Australia, but there are also other Australian institutions, people from other countries, and of course, Brazil, Colombia, and Chile as well. So do have a look. And in the meantime, I'm looking forward to the discussion now with Cassia. So Cassia, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Barbara, and to all of our panelists for the discussion tonight. Please, everyone, as Barbara mentioned, put your questions in the chat, in the Q&A function, or raise your hand if you want to ask a question to any of our panelists. I might kick us off, though, with a general question, which is, you know, hearing all of these presentations, there's a lot of overlap and synergies in what everyone is doing. So how do we collaborate to leverage our expertise, our knowledge, and shared commitment to solving the challenges to better outcomes? Do we have any of our panelists that want to start? Otherwise, I might ask Nelly to kick us off. Professor Nelly.
Thank you, Cassia. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think actually some of the projects that I shared in my presentation are actually product of collaboration, international collaboration, right? One of our projects that I emphasized, for example, that was the biogas-based powered one, right? Was particularly with a researcher from Australia who focus precisely in energy systems analysis, right? So I think that, and I mean, based, of course, also on the presentations, I think that one of the points, right, where we can take advantage of international collaboration is precisely on these different specialties that we have in the different institutions. I think that we can already see it from the presentations today, right, that we can have some alignments, right, but we also have, I guess, different added values from the different institutions, and that also stems from our national contexts, right? So I think that it is very valuable to be able to collaborate to strengthen these projects.
Wonderful, thank you. Do any of our other panelists have anything to add? Professor Daniel?
Yeah, happy to. In my experience, in order to establish a collaboration, what works best is exchanging students. That's, I would say, the best way of doing it, sending students back and forth so that they can learn the research that the other group does and we can start exchanging ideas. Another way of doing it, which has worked for me in the past as well, is exchanging data. So if we are performing similar analysis in our centers, we can compare the data that we have. We run larger study cases, and also it's more impactful research we can compare with international benchmarks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Daniel. Mark, you've got your microphone off.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So look, I guess from my perspective on the international collaboration and bringing some of those expertise together that have been presented, it's largely about getting those 1 + 1 = 3 situations. So being able to take advantage of funding and partnership opportunities within your own country to engage with the expertise that those other countries are working on, and getting, extending the outcomes so that you have results that apply in both places. So like in our case, we actively engage in those in the forest health place. We work actively with Brazilian partners, as well as South African, Spanish partners, because we found a common thread around biosecurity as it relates to eucalyptus plantations. And each of those partners has a motivation, access to funding, and the opportunity to execute trials in practice that have impact on the ground. And by having all of the expertise from across those countries engaged in a common approach, is allowing all of us to accelerate what we otherwise would be doing on our own. So looking for those kind of, as I said, 1 + 1 = 3 synergies, I think is what's key to making it work for everybody involved.
Perfect. And Professor Louise, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to point out that to Dr. Brown that Federal University of Paraná has a very strong forestry engineering. So maybe there could be an opportunity for you guys to get in touch with them in areas of common interest. I could see in your presentation that there are many possibilities in terms of a collaboration there. What we do mostly in terms of biomass is, typically biomass conversion processes. So if any one of you is interested in establishing a collaboration with that in mind, and we pretty much work with every single type of biofuel, we would be very happy to assist. Anyway, hopefully this run effort will provide us links to do that somehow. The Federal University of Paraná has a very strong internationalization program. So if there are scholars or students that want to come there could be an opportunity there, fully funded by the Brazilian government as part of this internationalization effort. The only requirement is that the university has to have a memorandum of understanding signed with us. With that in hand, it's easy to apply and eventually raise funds for this staff or student exchange. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
That's fantastic, and what a fantastic opportunity, Louise, and I'm sure you'll get some people reaching out around that as well. We've had a question in the chat from Raquel for the presenters around what is the role of people and cultural landscapes in renewable energy project planning, development and implementation in your country, and how is it approached to obtain a social license to operate?
I can start there if you like.
Mark.
So within Australia specifically, I might come back to that and start. So if I take the example I gave in the Philippines, all of that centers around the local communities. So it's part of the energy transition and how do we manage carbon in the environment, and that provides a very obvious economic driver to get the project off the ground or deploy it. But in practice, if we go back over the 20+ years of research we've been doing with that region and that community and the local universities around forest restoration, forest conservation, there's a myriad of publications that has come from that research through our association with ACER here in Australia, who fund research support projects in developing nations. But a lot of that work was really the strength of it, and what attracted the attention to make it a viable or interesting investment to progress the research down a more commercial pathway was the fact that it was so deeply embedded with the local community. So it was really driven by social outcomes for that community. There's a number of examples where the improved land management has actually increased access to clean potable water for those communities, which has then driven further development and growth around the people being able to stay, work, and develop the economy, biodiversity, and other internationally recognized values, and have also been improved and increased through that project. So all of that to say that the foundation that makes that a strong, high impactful, the ability to attract new research investment to progress it, all centers around the strength of the community engagement and the strength of the community impact and outcomes from the work that's been done in the past, and that it gives the faith and the trust, I guess, of that community to follow down additional research and development opportunities on that they've had the success in the past. If I translate that back into the Australian context, a lot of that starts to play out in how we engage with the First Nations and Indigenous communities who have large areas of land under their management responsibility, and a huge history of knowledge and experience in how they've managed that land for tens of thousands of years, and how we can engage with that strength of experience, knowledge of the resource, the community engagement that comes with that long history of ownership and presence on the land, and how you bring that into an effective engagement into modern opportunities and solutions that relate to things like carbon and energy transition, renewable fuels and energy. So that becomes a very interesting catalyst that we're only really just touching the edges of with some of our current research, and looking more closely at how we develop that, including in the progress of looking at a quite specifically Indigenous research facility at the university that will become a catalyst for us to work with and explore those opportunities more completely.
Thanks, Mark. Were there any other observations from the panel around building that social license?
Yeah, well, I can comment on the case of Chile as well. If you look at the case of Chile 20 years ago, community involvement wasn't wasn't in the top 3 list of the concerns of the companies. But nowadays, most of the companies that operate in the Chilean energy system have the decision that they will not make any project where there is opposition of the local communities. So in order to build those projects, they have to start with early involvement of the communities. We are also developing in many of the regions local energy strategies so that the companies can know whether their project is aligned or not with the local strategy of the region. And we also have a national program, which is the national long-term energy planning, which also involves community opinions. So we have several layers of community involvement so that there's a more or less a clear path for development of energy projects. In any case, you will always find projects that in the last stages, they find strong oppositions, and sometimes they cannot be developed. But that's how we have dealt with it in Chile.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Luis, how is it in Brazil?
Well, I don't know if my answer satisfies the broad sense of the question, but let me take a look at this in a different perspective. Brazil has 2 very important national plans for biofuels. Those are the bioethanol plan and the biodiesel plan. And in both cases, there was a lot of effort to protect the producers so that the feedstock be secured. For example, the biodiesel program has a certificate called social seal. And this social seal is a way of attracting family agribusinesses to the bioenergy sector so that they could have their product sold to cooperatives that would then convey the material to the biodiesel producers. So there's an important contact between the public policies and the producers, because I mean you could not do such a large program in a country as large as Brazil without securing the feedstock supply. Of course, there are many, and I'm not the right person to talk about that, but there are many efforts in that direction as well in this country. And of course, maybe I should say prepare myself for the next question, because this one, sorry, hope my example is fruitful to everyone.
Thank you, Professor Luis. And Professor Nelly, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think in Colombia, it has also been particularly relevant, right, to include, for example, dialogues with the community, because with the communities in general, right, because the department, for example, here in the country with the highest potential for renewable energy generation is La Guajira, right, which is in the north of the country. And it's a department or a region, right, that faces particular challenges in the sense that it's an extractive-based economy. It has a large indigenous population, and it also has a poor socioeconomic performance, right? So it definitely has been key to include these dialogues to be able to advance with renewable energy projects, right? Because the implementation or the inclusion of these new alternatives are definitely going to be, let's say, key, right, for the development of these communities in the future. So I think it's an opportunity, right, for us to connect these particular, for example, region in the case of Colombia. So it has definitely been really key, right, to include these communities in the conversation, in the dialogues to take decisions that are aligned with everybody's or with the collective interest.
Yeah. And building on that concept, Nelly, I'm thinking about the clean energy transition and the move to net zero in the context of development. So in Australia, we have standards, for example, around the built environment and moving residential and commercial buildings to net zero by 2050. But that's obviously one particular context in Australia. And I guess I'd be interested to see how those targets are playing out in Latin America, particularly where we have poorer communities that are on that development trajectory, and what the policies are looking like in that space for development, whether they're aggressive enough, whether they're impacting on that development, whether they're assisting the development, having these, clean energy policies and programs in place?
So I think we are taking, right, I would say the first steps, right? We already have our clean energy transition law, right, which was established in 2014, around 2014, right, which has set the regulatory framework in the country to be able to accomplish these goals, right? But that law is mainly or it has mainly focused or has mainly incentivized subsidies, right, or financing for renewable energy projects. We have already a carbon tax, for example. So we do have, I would say, some measures that have already been taken, right? We still need, and I think as I wanted to show on that first slide, right, we are still very far away from our goals of renewable energy share, for example. But I think that in terms of the regulatory framework, we have already taken the first steps. Now, to your question, is it aggressive enough? I would probably say it's not aggressive enough yet, right? I think probably you have to walk before you run, right? And I mean, we are getting there, but I think we are taking the steps towards that direction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nelly. Other thoughts on that concept from Luis, Daniel, particularly for Brazil, Colombia?
Yeah, so if I'm sorry, I think I missed the question. It's related to retrofitting buildings. Is that correct?
Yeah, so about buildings, but also other government policies about moving to net zero. How are they in Chile? Are they, aggressive enough? Are the targets high enough? Will we get there soon enough?
Yeah.
And what impact does that have?
Yeah, well, we have a target for net zero by 2050, which is, I would say, on the average of the countries that have pledged net zero targets. I think it's not aggressive enough in the case of Chile because we have one of the best PV potentials in the world in the north of Chile and also very high wind power potential. We can reach even planned factors of 50% has been estimated for wind power onshore in the very south of Chile. So with all this renewable potential, I think we can do much better than 2050. Our main limitation is energy storage, I guess, and that I believe is the same for all the countries that have not very well interconnected electricity systems. We are waiting for the right solution of energy storage systems so that we can accommodate more renewables. In terms of policies for houses or buildings, we are following closely the experience of Australia with the Neighbours agency. We wish we could have a similar program in Chile, but so far we have been working on improving the insulation codes for houses so that we don't waste that much energy on warming houses.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, Cassia, of course, there are many policies being written in Brazil right now. There are many documents being released, the National Hydrogen Plan. There's also some specific documents regarding the targets for net zero. We have similar goals for 2030 and 2050, as already mentioned by others here. We see, and we heard recently, especially after the government changed, a return to more careful approaches regarding renewable energy. And I'm not defending one or another here, you know, it's just a matter of making it more visible, because again, as Barbara said, it's not enough. I mean, 2030 is just around the corner, and if we want to do something, you know, to meet those targets, you know, things should have been decided like long ago. And but what impresses us is the speed by which these things are developing, especially with involvement of the private sector. Likewise, Chile, Brazil is seen as an ideal place for several projects related to renewable energy, and we benefit from having a highly interconnected electricity system. Therefore, a lot of people are now thinking and investing about projects such as mini grids, you know, to hook onto the system. But of course, I mean, there should be policies, you know, rules to regulate that market. Otherwise, it's a waste. Recently in Brazil, in this government, a new taxation was raised for solar energy production that made no sense, because in the past, the solar energy producers, I mean, those who had, and we own the family. My family own a farm in the countryside, and we have a solar panels, you know, installed. And in the past, not too long ago, we could use the grid, you know, we could send energy to the grid without any charges. Nowadays, we have to pay for that, you know, and unless something is done about that, this will demotivate a lot of people from investing in these sort of solutions. But yeah, I believe that more policies should be made, and they should be made more aggressive. The Brazilian hydrogen plan, for instance, is very nice. You know, the information is everything is there, but what is missing is actions to actually meet those goals. And I believe that you know, there should be more going on to be able to meet the deadlines that have been proposed.
Great. Thanks, Louise. Just given time, I'm going to ask each of you to briefly answer one last question before we hand to Barbara to wrap up and tell us a bit more about the delegation that will come next year. And that's thinking back to our partnership with Regional University Network. What's the role of your universities in your communities to support the energy transition, whether that's training up the new workforce, supporting the communities along this journey? Like, how are you as universities in your communities really supporting that? Louise, while we're on you, do you want to say something?
Well, you see, I am a chemist. All right. Well, what we do, let me take by steps, you know, if you could repeat each one of those issues related to your question, I could approach them individually.
Sure, and maybe you can take one. So, you know, what's your university doing within the context of your community to support the energy transition? And that might be, you know, working with researchers to train people and new ways of working.
of course, I mean, there are many training actions right now. Even people from our university, including myself, involved in this PTX community or PTX hub community that was created in Germany for disseminating hydrogen production technologies and PTX. So yeah, there are many people involved in that. Courses are being given. We see many graduate courses now providing courses related to the energy transition. Several graduate programs have been created with that perspective too, either in business schools and also within the technology schools, but more related to bioenergy and to introducing the concept of renewable energy and biorefining. So there's a lot going on. More recently, the undergrads have been invited to take part in workshops to discuss that, because and you know, I don't know, maybe something that we could do more, and we're starting to do, but it's not easy to do that. I've been involved with this in the past, and I tell you right now, it was not easy. But to go to the colleges and speak to the youth about energy transition, explain to them what that is, because it's complicated. I mean, there's a message here which is pretty much related to environmental education that we're missing a lot. There's much that we can do for the energy transition that is just about energy efficiency. We don't have to talk much about anything else but energy efficiency. A great deal of what we need to meet the Paris Agreement milestones is related to energy efficiency. I believe that IRENA had a study indicating that 40% of the 70% decrease of CO2 emissions that we needed to reach the deadline of decreasing the global warming to the limits established, 40% could be only met by improving energy efficiency. And that reaches us as well, you know. We have to do better. We have to learn how to preserve or to make best or better use of the energy we have. And of course, every step, I mean, of course, slowly, right? Learn how to take an advantage of the feedstocks and sources that we are yet to learn how to, you know, use it well. So yeah, there's much room to be to move forward here. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Professor Luis. Any other sort of reflections on quick reflections on the role of the universities and communities before we wrap up, Daniel?
Sure. I mean, I totally agree with Luis that I think the most important climate action is education, education in sustainability, and also education of new generations, not only at the university level, but also at schools, in order to build this cultural change that is needed in order to realize the energy transition with all that it means. It's not only changing technologies, changing the way we live in society, I believe. From the perspective of our university, I think our main focus or our main area of impact is energy policy. And that might be just because our university started as a business school some 70 years ago or so. I believe it was the first business school in Latin America, and it became a more complex university in the 90s. But for that reason, we have a very strong connection with decision makers in Chile, and our main area of impact is policy.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Mark, do you want to wrap us up as our regional university representative?
Yeah, so that obviously as a regional university, engagement with the community is kind of centerpiece and paramount for us to have success. And largely we do that as trying to be an exemplar in the community. So we have a couple major renewable energy projects on campus, one of which hosts, at the time of installation, was the largest water battery in the Southern Hemisphere. So that creates a bit of interest and attraction and becomes a bit of a teaching, research, and community engagement tool on campus. More broadly than that, as I said in my presentation, we look to build off of local partnerships and collaborations into national networks and projects and into international collaborations. So driving that and bringing it back to whether they be seminars or workshops or student projects through undergrad, honors, masters, PhD. All of those have a role or a contribution in that local education, engagement and teaching, or sorry, engagement and research. So yeah, it's kind of intertwined and runs through most of what we do. So it's almost second nature in many ways for us.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mark. And thank you so much for all of our amazing speakers tonight. I think we had a really nice mix of, from chemistry right down to the community engagement. So thank you again. I'm going to hand over to Barbara, who's going to give a quick wrap up now, including some information on the delegation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cassia. I'd like to also echo your thanks to all of tonight's fantastic speakers, everybody who's on the screen here from Australia, Brazil, Chile and Colombia, and also our colleague Alec Webb from the Regional Universities Network for his overview of the association of these Australian universities. I'll keep it brief because we are slightly over time. You may have noticed we didn't break out into rooms on this occasion, but we still very much would like to ensure that this was a networking event. So I would encourage everybody to have a look in the chat one last time. You'll see a lot of different offers for interests, connections, contact points of where people would like to collaborate. And that's a fantastic starting point as a next step out of tonight's webinar. But of course, as we mentioned, we've had Regional Universities Network members here and researchers as part of this call. We've also had researchers from other Australian institutions, so please do look to connect with them as well. But of course, we are working with the Regional Universities Network on a visit next year in March to Brazil, Colombia and Chile. The dates for those visits have been confirmed, so the research delegation will travel to Curitiba on the 18th to 20th of March 2024, followed by Bogota in Colombia on the 21st to the 23rd of March, and then Santiago in Chile on the 24th to the 26th of March. And so those visits will intend to build on the conversations we've started here tonight. They'll include lectures, networking activities, site visits, a whole range of engagement opportunities for the RUN members and partners in the 3 countries. And so if you are interested in staying in touch with us, we will send an email after this webinar to see if you would like to be kept updated on plans for the delegation and to participate in those events. So without sort of speaking too much longer and letting everybody, particularly in Brazil and Chile, have their evenings, given it's late there, we hope that this is just the beginning of the connection that we have with tonight's speakers, with the people who've joined us here, and of course the people who are travelling next year to the 3 countries. So thank you so much again to our speakers for your time, your expertise, your generous contributions. We really appreciate it. And we're really excited about some of the opportunities already emerging for closer cooperation, mobility, partnerships between our institutions and our people. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have a great evening for those in Latin America. Enjoy the day ahead for those in Australia. And we hope to see you soon. We'll be in touch by email shortly with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you very much.